Hi, my name is Isaac Johnston. I'm a Montana-based photographer, film director, filmmaker. I've made a spot for myself, having a passion for making engaging stories and talking about and making stories based around my adventurous lifestyle.
Welcome to the Real Riders Podcast, a podcast about filmmaking motorcyclists and motorcycling filmmakers. My name's Simon Josie, and if this is your first time here, welcome and thanks for listening. I have to thank my good friend Noel Tom from the Trail and Adventure Motorbike podcast for hooking me up with this episode's guest, Isaac Johnston. As you'll hear in the main interview, Isaac was a recent guest on the Trail and Adventure Motorbike podcast himself, episode 21 of season 7 to be specific, which was published on the 16th of March. I recommend you go find that episode and listen to it if you haven't already. I got to interview Isaac at the end of March, which is why you'll have to briefly tolerate some early Northern Hemisphere spring weather talk. Hey, fair weather riders like me are pretty obsessed with the weather, so don't at me. I was first introduced to the character Isaac Johnston in his co-starring role alongside Lal Pavey in the film 100 Kicks in the Desert, which you can find on the Break Magazine YouTube channel under the title 2 XT500s and the Sahara Desert. We recreated the first Dakar Rally / Dakar Rally feature film. Quite a mouthful. That film premiered in late December last year at the Bike Shed in London, an event I was lucky enough to attend. Since then, I've done a deep dive into Isaac's YouTube channel, which is well worth your attention. Isaac's enthusiasm for motorcycling, and well, everything in fact I have to say, is immediately obvious when you start watching his films. And he has such an interesting backstory. He's another amateur photographer who has created a career in the commercial photography and film industries. In the show notes, you'll find links to Isaac's YouTube channel, Instagram account, and website. On his website, you can see examples of his commercial work, plus there's also a link to his Creative Live workshop on how to become a freelance photographer. Before we get to my chat with Isaac, let me remind you that the podcast has an account on Instagram where you will find, amongst other things, trailers for each new episode. And if you want to know what I've been watching recently, follow the Real Riders account on Bluesky. Links for both the Instagram and Bluesky accounts are in the show notes. Finally, if you have the time and inclination, please consider rating or liking the Real Riders podcast in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. This will help other listeners find the podcast. Righto, let's get to my talk with Isaac. Welcome to the podcast, Isaac. Thanks for joining me on the show today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good, yeah.
Yeah, and is it must be full-on springtime in Montana at the moment?
You know, it's not supposed to be this time of year. Actually, March is typically miserable. Typically when we get the most snow in the mountains. However, 70 degrees yesterday. It's supposed to be mid-60s today. But I'm off to a project tomorrow in Florida and the Bahamas. So it doesn't matter how it is in Montana. It can snow. I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to get some warm weather here for spring.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, look, so much of your backstory was recently well covered in episode 21, season 7 of the Trail and Adventure Motorbike podcast. So I'm going to try and avoid covering the same material here today. Listener, go and listen to Isaac's chat with Clive and Noel. As always, it's a great listen. What I want to do instead is to dive into your worlds of photography and filmmaking. As someone who moved from amateur photography to working full-time as a freelance photographer and film director, have you ever been concerned that your well of creativity, which is required to work full-time in these fields of commercial photography and filmmaking, have you ever been concerned that that well was going to dry up?
You know, in the beginning, I was just taking photos of things that I liked to take photos of. And I was just visually curious. And I actually think that curiosity is one of those things for me. They say that your biggest strength is also your biggest weakness. For me, curiosity is my biggest strength. But because of that, I sometimes lack focus. But I think because of that, I've always been curious about a bazillion things. I was concerned at first that I would run out of creativity in the certain niche that I was in, which was adventure outdoor at the time. I wasn't doing anything moto. I mean, I was riding moto in the background, but I knew that that was kind of what people wanted to see from me. This was when I was much more social focused on Instagram. But the more I've gotten into this, more deeper I've gotten into this, is that I think creativity and inspiration for creativity always comes if you start moving your feet and doing the thing, like creating. Because you will find problems that you encounter in filming a story or a technical gear problem or some other problem that requires you to think of a different way. And through that, the story will change and grow. I mean, we were talking before the show about how no matter what, it's like 1 out of 10 videos that I do, there will be a problem with the audio. That I had the most popular video I've made for a friend's channel. Actually, we made it together on his channel, like 400,000 plus views. The audio was messed up the entire trip. Something happened to the camera. It got salt water on it or something like that, and it was messed up the entire trip. And that caused me to cut the video in a way that I never would have cut before, and to do some VO, which I never would have done before. And that ended up being the most popular video. So all that to say, I am concerned, or I was concerned in the beginning, that I might run out of creativity and that this would get boring and that I would just have a dry well of ideas. And now I find that I always have a germ of an idea. And even if it sucks, I get out there and I start working on it. And something happens. Something always happens that changes it and creates a problem, which I have to use creativity to solve. And it's almost like just watering the earth. It's like, yeah, I've just dirt here. There's nothing here. I don't know anything. But if you get out there and you water it, there's always seeds inside of it. It grows something. It might not be exactly what you want, but it grows something.
So in terms of nourishing that creativity, or maybe when you're going through a dry spell, you sort of just get out and move more through the world to trigger that creativity. Would that be right?
Yeah. Or I just, I'm like, this is boring. But I also, again, a lot of things are boring. A lot of the work we have to do is boring. Like editing a video, which could be the most fun thing you've ever done, but the video of it is 28 hours of footage. Sitting in front of a computer, no matter how cool the footage is, for 28 hours is boring. But when I get out and I explore the world, I'm just biased. So like, for instance, this video I made, so again, I've made a series of videos with a friend of mine on his channel. We call it the No One Sees video series. It's on my friend Alex Stroll's video channel, and we do it together. I'm actually a character and the director and filmmaker for that. But really, when I get there, we go, all right, we're going to Croatia. Well, what would be cool to do there? And we kind of find all the hot spots and what everybody does. And then I go, well, wouldn't it be actually cool if like we went up in the mountains and met a sheep herder and he like offered us like sheep milk, and then we tried some of his fresh sheep cheese. And I just imagine these kind of experiences that I have read about in National Geographic or something like that. And I say, is this possible? And then we find a local or a producer or somebody to say, this isn't possible. And then I go, well, what is adjacent to that? So I think that no matter what, if you're just out in the world and you're curious about the world, there's always an idea. There's always some sort of creative inspiration. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something. And I would say 80% of the people that I've met, and I actually have a mentorship program for people who want to do what I do, they tend to just find no's and reasons why they can't. So if you just make anything, literal garbage, you're making something that other people aren't making because they just find that no. And they think, this isn't creative or inspiring enough. I'm not inspired by it. I'm not doing it. And so you just have to keep going when other people quit, and you are now a more creative person than 80% of the people out there.
How do you avoid becoming cliche in what you do? Like what do you do to ensure your work always stays fresh and that you're not just repeating yourself?
I think maybe that's a two-parter. Let's start with the cliche. I think you become a cliche of yourself or of anything when you're pretending at all. And by that, I mean, so I come from Instagram, where now it's just a morass of inauthentic people that are doing really well with it. I mean, they have tons of followers. They don't make any money because that doesn't mean anything on Instagram anymore. But they're pretending to be a homesteader, or they're pretending to be a chef, or they're pretending to be a fashion model or something like that. And I think the moment you try to be something that you're not inspired by, or you're trying to say, I am inspired by this, but I'm more successful at this than I actually am in real life, instead of just being like, I don't know, I'm just trying something, that makes you a cliche because you're not actually authentic to who you are. And I think people know when they're not being that, but they find it acceptable. They know when they're not actually being authentic to themselves. So I think, I don't know, I could be a cliche of myself. I don't know, but I'm not interested in finding out, because what I'm doing is just following my curiosity. I'm not trying to do anything that would be popular. I'm not trying to do anything that would be viral in today's world. Like, I think you used to be able to pursue virality 10 years ago, and that might lead you to something new and exciting. But now the way the algorithms work is virality is just doing what everybody else did and hopping on bandwagons. And I think that can make you a cliche very quickly. We all know the cliche of YouTubers, Instagrammers, TikTokers. Nobody likes that. Not even the TikTokers or the Instagrammers themselves. Like, the worst thing you can call somebody now is a content creator or an influencer, right? That's absolutely, that just connotates like a garbage human. Somebody who is like willing to pretend, but thinks they're cool. Like, it used to be that pretending was just for children. And that was awesome because pretending children are authentic to themselves. But now pretending adults think that they're some sort of successful person, and they might be, but they're like running workshops and how to be like me. And that just, I think everybody just feels like something's off. They just smell a rat. And so that's, I guess, to answer the cliche part of the question. I don't think I become a cliche. And again, I don't judge myself in that way, or my art, or just what I create. I try not to. But I think I don't, because I just don't want to create for any sort of validation from a social media app. I want to create because I want to share what I've created with my friends. That's it. If I'm not happy to share what I've created with my friends or my family, then it's probably not authentic to who I am. Because, right, like, if your mom isn't going to be pumped on what you made, you're probably not making the right stuff.
Okay, so that sort of begs a question, like, how do you get connection with your broader audience? Like, is that important for you? How do you achieve sort of connection with a broader audience? You know, the remote audience, the audience that maybe only knows you through YouTube or your commercials or whatever.
I think a lot of it, and I don't know that a lot of people will tell you this, but a lot of it is luck and timing, and really lucky timing. You have to recognize the opportunity when it comes to you. But I have a lot of friends who have a lot of Instagram followers, and they all started in, like, when the app started, like 2011 to 2015, when it was small and kind of catching on. And they were consistent by recognizing this is an opportunity. And they consistently made, like, they were posting 1 to 2 photos a day for 8 years. I didn't start on the app until December 2016. And I knew right away. I remember talking to a friend who had 500,000 followers at the time, and he's like, what are you going to do when you have, this many followers? And I said, I'll never have that many followers. It doesn't matter what I create. What matters is that the space is filled and that there's not as much excitement or momentum. You can, this was in like 2018, you could tell it was waning. And now it's absolutely waned. You have to sell your soul to get that kind of thing, or be externally famous, movie star, something, athlete, something like that. So connecting with a broader audience, I think, requires that you be in the right place at the right time. And Instagram, 2011 to 2016, was a gold rush. People were staking claims and making all sorts of things. And I have a friend, again, Alex Stroll, who's very successful, 2 million followers on Instagram. And I've never met anybody who worked as hard and as focused as him at being a photographer. And he's incredibly talented. He's got all the things going for him. And he started in 2011. That's how you connect with a broader audience, is you're in the right place at the right time. I'm not concerned with connecting with a broader audience. I don't even care. I think the most followers I ever had was like 145,000 on Instagram. I wasn't concerned with. I mean, obviously, I wanted to grow at the time because that was a place where I could gather resources. But now I'm lucky enough to have commercial filmmaking and photography support me mostly, and then my YouTube. I would love for it to support itself at some point, but it doesn't. I'm not concerned with connecting with them. I'm concerned with making things that are genuine to me and my niche and the things I'm excited about and the things that give me life. And hopefully, because I don't control any of the other bits, hopefully the right community finds me. And I don't know. I mean, you must have recognized something in the stuff I built, or Clive and Noel must have recognized something in the things I built to want to talk to me. So I think if you're true to that, hopefully people recognize it and it happens. But, and I'll put a little pin in this, you look at most artists throughout the eras of history, and I'm talking like artists, painters especially, they're always most famous when they're dead. Yet they always created art. They always, because it's what was in them. It's the thing they wanted to make.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And when you create in that way, like I'm just going to make the thing I want. And yes, it gives me fuel when somebody likes it, when somebody shares it, when somebody watches it. It absolutely gives me a little bit of dopamine hit that makes me want to create again. I'm not saying that. And that was what was the magic about early Instagram, is that would happen. But I think it's important that you create something that you would create if nobody was watching, and that you get better at it because you want to be better at it, not because you're going to end up with 1 million followers and some sort of social media clout. That's not going to work. As soon as it stops being paid, as soon as it stops giving you power, fame, or money, you will quit. You will absolutely be burned out. That's how people get burned out. They start making shit they're not interested in making for money, power, or clout. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention the timing thing, because some of my previous guests have grown their YouTube subscriber count, should we say, quite rapidly, but they recognize that there was sort of a sweet spot sort of around maybe 12 months before COVID, where the people who got into sort of motorcycle vlogging then really started to build an audience. And when a lot of countries went into COVID lockdown, people just went onto YouTube and were watching the things they couldn't do in real life. And that's where people like Itchy Boots and there are other famous people who just really shot up in terms of their subscriber counts. So it sort of replicates what you said about the you need to have a bit of luck with timing as well as all the other bits and pieces.
Yeah, but she works really hard, right? She puts out a lot of videos.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's the algorithm working as well. You've got to figure out what the algorithm wants, and you've got to generate a lot of films or a lot of videos, and you've got to be doing it regularly, and therefore your whole production has to be extremely efficient.
Yeah. I think that there is a note to put there, and that your production has to work very effectively. It depends on what you want to make, because I used to want to make adventure films because that's what I did for photography. And I would make them, but it would require that I have an adventure buddy, a friend who could do this and had an open schedule, that we had good weather, that we had all these sorts of things to make, and they were very hard to make consistently. I'm actively lowering the quality of what I make for YouTube. And the reason I am is because some of my favorite channels only film with a phone and a GoPro, and they post consistently, and I get engaged with them, and it becomes like hanging out with a friend, even though I have no idea who these people are. I can engage with them over and over again, and of course I see their video, and I want to see what they're up to next. Versus, I can tell you how many times I've just scrolled right past a cinematic video from somebody who hasn't posted in a year, and I'm just like, I don't really care to see this beautiful video. Like, I see lots of beautiful videos. I don't care about that. That's not hard to do. What's hard to do is just to be consistent. And so, going back to that production value, you have to pick a subject or a way of making videos that is easy enough that you, again, remove barriers and just get out there and get past that resistance and make things. And I'm actively trying to do that. I'm behind in my posting schedule right now because, I have this other career as a commercial filmmaker that gets in the way. But I'm also, the process of editing a video in which I lowered the quality. And now I'm like, did I lower it too much? Is this boring? I don't know, but it is easy enough to make, right? Like, I'm just like, instead of waiting for the perfect moment, weather, bike, all that, I'm just getting out there and making the thing. That's hard, but is part of the growth, or just reaching a broader audience, maybe, is what you were saying in your earlier question, that's part of it.
Is that what you set out with the hardest tracks in the world? I can't remember the exact name of the film, but the film that you shot in Hawaii with your friends.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, because I realized it's quite different to some of your other stuff. Multicam, but that's because everyone had a helmet cam on, basically.
Right.
And that was basically, I think maybe you had another camera person as well, but basically that was it, wasn't it?
Some of the guides started filming for me just because they're nice. I didn't even ask them. But yeah, that's it. I mean, that wasn't even, I thought I'll film something. Maybe I'll make an Instagram clip out of it because I was in Hawaii and I was going for a ride. But yeah, actively lowering the quality. In fact, there was a comment on there. It's like, great video, your helmet cams are shit. If you figure that out, you'll have it made. And I thought, that's ironic, isn't it? I must hit the sweet spot here, because all of the stuff I make, not necessarily on YouTube, but all of the stuff I make for work, it's, I've just bought a $10,000 cinema camera behind me. Like, that's the way that it goes for work. And this guy has no idea. He's commenting that my quality is shit and that I don't know how to do this. That means that I'm right about dialed in. I'm right about dialed in. This is right where I want to be. But that video, again, took some time to edit. It still took a while to edit because it's multicam. And to do the VO and to kind of craft a story out of just regular, everyday, crappy helmet cam footage. It's the same footage that everybody makes with a GoPro.
Yeah.
Is this the deal is that I wanted to spend some time, and I literally behind the scenes sat down and wrote out the play-by-play, the intro, the middle bit, the tough bit, the where we end up, what did we accomplish, and the ending, and then tried to fit all these pieces into a block and create a VO that kind of took the viewer on a little bit of a journey, but not a lot of a journey. Again, I'm not trying to create anything epic here in those types of films. Now, when I get a chance, like I did in Morocco with Llewellyn, there will be bigger films with bigger production. Or like I'll do a bike build, and that'll be a longer process. But let's step back here. 2017 was, I think, when I posted my first video. I've been trying to do YouTube for a while. The problem is I was a commercial photographer and the commercial filmmaker now, both of them. And that pays the bills. So anytime anything comes up and gets in the way of paying the bills, right? Like we all are, the hobby gets pushed to the side. The side project is the side project, and that's what YouTube is. And I was always trying to make these things too hard or coming up with ideas that were, outside of a niche. They were a bit broad. So thinking, like, does this fit? And just too much thought and all sorts of things going into this video. And then when I said, you know what, it's just going to be moto, and I'm going to actively lower the quality, I could write out 25 video ideas right now. Really simple ones, from just like a bike I want to review, to a bike I want to build, to top 10 things I want to put on my hard enduro bike, to can you hard enduro bike a vintage motorcycle, to like all of these things. None of those are that hard. Not any of them. So, I mean, for me, it's really just about lowering that quality and having it be a different style. It's also taken me since 2017, what is that, 8 years? It's taken me that long to figure out that nobody gives a shit about my video. They just want me to talk in my typical enthusiastic way. They just want to feel like they're on a ride with me or on an adventure with me. They don't care what the quality is. That's my true audience.
So that ties together two things for me, because you talked about authenticity before, and I think that comes across in spades. Like, it's so obvious how enthusiastic you are about what you're doing, whatever you're doing, it seems. That's just like, and that's very infectious. And I think, and clearly, yeah, it really wouldn't matter what you're doing, because I think you'd sort of bring that enthusiastic game to whatever you were doing. That's the impression we get as viewers. And so I think that really works. But also with the Hawaii film, even though, yeah, it was just helmet cams, the sound was good. And so you heard all the smart comments. The editing is done in a fun, pacey way. It's very engaging because you're telling the story about how everyone's getting on as you're going up the hill from different sort of perspectives. Because the voiceover is clear, and because the helmet cam audio is clear as well, because some care has been taken with that, actually, it doesn't matter that you've got GoPro footage and it's helmet cam stuff. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not the typical YouTuber. I don't want you or anyone else to publish stuff regularly. I just want you to publish what you do when you do it. Because I'm kind of overwhelmed, all these people I follow, and I'm really struggling to keep up. Like, I don't watch television. I just sort of like watch YouTube and do a lot of research.
Same for the last 15 years since YouTube started.
Yeah.
I just love YouTube. I just like watching it. But unlike you, where you said you have too many people to keep up with, because I've been watching it for so long, the people that I subscribed to 15, 10, 7 years ago, they don't even make videos anymore. So I'm constantly like, man, I wish that this guy would make a video, Like, one of my favorite creators is Bo Miles.
Oh, yeah.
I think I just saw that he posted a video today. I haven't watched it. And he hasn't posted a video for maybe 2 or 3 months. And I know he was struggling with burnout.
Right.
Some people that I know had interviewed him and said he's great, but he's on the verge of giving this whole thing up because he's not had the amount of success that he thought he would have. which is crazy to say for somebody that's that successful.
I was going to say,
Yeah, yeah. But and that's just rumor. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know Bo. I just know somebody who's interviewed him. But for me, it's like I just love the platform. There's so many social media platforms. When I get off of them, I go, yuck, I just wasted my life. I got trapped on Instagram for 45 minutes. I could have done anything else. I could have been literally just sitting in a chair in my garage, staring at my motorcycle, and had a better time and felt more productive and more alive.
Yeah.
But I rarely feel that when I get off YouTube, because it's a little more commitment too. Like if you're going to watch a 20-minute video, you better have 20 minutes. You can't watch it in line at the post office. You can't fill those gaps in your life that are healthy and helpful to be bored at. So it is the only social media app that I have on my phone, if you call it a social media app. I don't keep them on there anymore.
So you got into photography first of all before you got into filmmaking, right?
I did, yeah. So, my journey is a little bit unconventional with regards to creating video and photos. I had a full-time job in vacation rental management. So I was working at a company. We had $65 million of property under management. I was running the entire company, working with 15 team members, and had a full-on career. And then started using photographers when Instagram was in its infancy to promote that company. And they would come up here, and I just love doing things with people and kind of enhancing their experience, especially outside and with regards to adventures and stuff like that. So I started being like, well, I could learn marketing from these people who are on the cusp of marketing, or I could go to a college course and learn it from somebody who's not good enough to do it in the real world. And these people are here. I mean, these were the best photographers in the world at the time, the most well-known on Instagram at the time for sure. And they came up kind of in a group, and I rented them a house, or I traded them a house for 3 months in exchange for social media posts and all the sorts of things that we know as influencer marketing now. And at that time, 2016, I had to get all of these owners of these houses and the owner of the company, my brother-in-law, to believe in me, to like basically give away about $45,000 to $70,000 worth of stays, because I knew this would be a thing. And to make sure that it worked, I said, I don't want you to just go out and shoot the tourist hotspots here in Montana. I'm going to take you on these crazy adventures all over. I'm going to take you to all these places. I'm going to tell you where to go if I can't go with you. And these guys really liked that, to the point where they're like, hey, they started inviting me to come on these adventures. They put a camera in my hand and taught me a little bit about it. Still wasn't a photographer really. And, about 6 months later, I've become pretty good friends with one of them. And he called me up and he said, hey, I know that you're running this company. I know you're doing a great job, but I just signed 2 of the biggest deals I've ever signed in my life. I think they were $250,000 each on the same year. He thought he was going to get 0 of them. He got $250,000 year-long project with Canon cameras and a $250,000 year-long project with Land Rover. And they were kind of overlapping, but there was a ton of logistics. And he goes, I need somebody who knows adventure, who does fun things, who can be in front of the camera as well as, help with the logistics of this whole thing. And what he called the position was chief of adventure. I need somebody to basically make this adventure real, not just an idea and a bunch of photos. Not a year-long photo shoot. I think we had to make like 3 films for each brand and a bunch of other stuff. And so I said, no, thank you. I have a career. I've got 2 kids, wife. Like, I'm just not interested in that. But I went and talked to my wife about it. And there were some things I had wanted to own that company, and there was not really a path for that. Because it was owned by my brother-in-law, I couldn't just step to the side and start my own gig in the same area. That would cause some sort of family drama. So I needed to kind of like step away for a while. And I talked to my wife, and we both said, none of our goals are like massive houses or anything. They probably should have been. But we wanted to travel more at that point with our kids. And this was an opportunity. My friend Alex was like, if you come do this, you can bring your kids. We can go all these places. You can bring your kids. And we thought, we'll just give it a crack. I considered it a year-long mini retirement. I was going to do it for a year. I told Alex I'd help him for a year. And I was in the vacation rental industry. I had people kind of headhunting me to go to other larger companies. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that, because I want to be number 1 at a small company versus biggest fish in a small pond versus small fish in a big pond. But that is a nice fallback. I could always get another job in a year. All these people at these other companies know who I am. I could get a job in a minute. So away we went. We drove in Land Rovers to Alaska for, I think, a month and a half. And then we came down and we drove all the way down the spine of the Rockies from the Canadian border to the Mexican border. Then I ended up in New Zealand. and we did a myriad of other things. I think we went to Vermont and did some off-roading in Land Rovers, all these things. Spent an entire year. The first thing I did actually, so I said, yeah, I'll quit my job. First thing I did, I went to Peru for 20 days for Canon cameras, and we trekked around this big mountain range down there and had a great time. And I was kind of telling my story about not really knowing what the hell I'm doing, but taking photos anyway. And people really resonated with that. And my Instagram went from 0 to 80,000 in like 3 months. And it was, it was new and fresh at the time. So the very long-winded way of saying, no, I didn't do anything with cameras. That was when I was 31. I thought cameras were for nerds. Like that was the kind of thing that like you were in drama class and you did film photography and you were basically a nerd. It was cool to take photos, but the act of like photos and talking about ISO and shutter speed, like, nah, that's okay. Let's go do something. But I really fell in love with the idea of documenting stories and interesting stories. Like that was in my family and my extended family. Every time there would be a family reunion, people just get together and tell stories. And like there was a lot of family lore. And I learned that I could document my own stories, and it turned them into lore. It was more than what they were. So that was kind of my start, was taking photos. And within a year, I didn't even call myself a photographer because I didn't think my photos were that good. They weren't that good, but I had a social media presence, so people would partner with me to take photos of their products. And away I went. I think I had my first commercial, or not commercial, but social media promotion job with photos 3 months in. And by a year, I was fully sustained by that. And by sustained, I mean like barely. It was, my wife is like, yeah, you made a lot more money at the other thing, but the lifestyle's good. But, there was other things that kept me going. In the first like 3 years that I did this, I hung out with my kids more than my dad hung out with me my entire young adult life. I've been working from home for the last month and a half. And then, tomorrow I'll leave for 2 weeks, and then I'll come back and I'll be home for the foreseeable future, which is really great for having kids. So those kind of things kept me going, but it was precarious. I didn't have a lot of talent in this. Not a lot of talent at all. I knew what a good story was, but I didn't have any technical skill or editing skill or color grading skill. But I also, because I was 31 when I started doing this, I didn't have a lot of ego involved in it. So I would, just text my friend a photo that I had just edited, and say, look, I don't know what to do with this. And I wasn't offended if he was like, this is garbage. I don't think this composition's good. Or, dude, what are you doing with this edit? Like, you should absolutely do this, this, and this. I just full on was able to absorb and learn everything that they said and just take it and try it out and decide if I liked it. But I wasn't Isaac the photographer ever. Like, I literally didn't call myself a photographer until probably about 4 or 5 years in, when I felt like I had some iota of a skill, but it wasn't very much, even at 5 years in.
You talk about storytelling, and I'm kind of intrigued. I'm really interested in how photographers become filmmakers, and there's the sort of technical aspect to that. But in terms of storytelling, did you first develop storytelling techniques with the still image, and then to what extent did you have to adapt your ideas about storytelling when it came to making films?
So I think one of the things that I've always been and always thought was valuable was to be medium agnostic. And what I mean by that is I don't care what the tools are of how we're going to tell the story. I don't care if I'm writing an article. I don't care if I'm taking a photo. I don't care if I'm making a video. I don't care if I'm, recording a song. I don't care. What I'm trying to impart is the enthusiasm or the drama or the weight of the story. I want there to be something at stake, and I want there to be some sort of gratifying conclusion at the end. I don't care if that story's 15 seconds long or if it's 15 hours long. It doesn't matter to me. I think that was imparted in me from my mom's family, who were big storytellers. Again, when they would get together, they would just all tell stories. I can remember them telling stories about how and I think I said this on Clive and Noel's podcast, my uncles would tell stories about how they were riding their 78 and 79 TT500s, which they bought new in the early 80s. And they went camping with my grandparents, who had this big, like 30-foot RV. And my mom was in the RV with my grandma and my grandpa, and they were going over this mountain pass. And my uncles came by, standing on the seat, and then just ghost riding the motorcycles like a surfboard past them on either side on this mountain pass. And my grandma freaking out. Like, those were the kind of stories that, like, I knew were different from the typical stories, that were interesting. And obviously I didn't know why or how the structure of that story was told. I didn't have any sort of technical ideas why that story worked. I just knew when I told it, it engaged people. And that was kind of the guiding light for me, was what was engaging. So when I started doing photography and posting on Instagram, I knew that my photos weren't as good as my friends who have been doing photos, since they were in their teens. But I really leaned into the captions and tried to make a beginning, end, and middle, or a beginning, middle, and end, and tried to make sure that there was a fuller picture that was better than just woke up early for sunrise, hiked to this lake, it was tough, # worth it. Boring. Not only is there, and I've always said there was a lot of those captions early on. First off, when you say worth it, you are insinuating that there was some sort of sacrifice. But nothing has more privilege in it than hiking to a lake, of which requires nothing from you for your survival, or no sacrifice or no need other than to see something beautiful. You're insinuating that you had some sort of sacrifice. That would drive me bananas. And I was able to recognize right away, there's no gravitas to that story. So I would try to just talk about either how grateful I was that I was able to walk around this mountain in Peru and how incredible it was, and how the mountain guide had taught me a few Spanish words, and I was terrible at it, but I was trying my best. Something that was like relatable and engaging. That's what I would try and tell. And so through that, I kind of learned, and I never really liked writing in high school age, but I was able to kind of fumble my way through it. But through that, I learned, how to piece together a, beginning, middle, and end. When transitioning to video, boy, it's a big beast. It looks like this big wall, and you're like, all right, I'm going to make a YouTube video. And I tried. And I went to New Zealand. I was like, I'm going to make a Casey Neistat style vlog. This one, Casey Neistat was just starting to get big. And I found, first off, I don't like talking to the camera in front of strangers. Not going to happen. Not doing it. It's just not going to happen. Even today. I'm not walking in a public space talking to the camera. Awkward as hell. When I see other people do it, I judge them. Therefore, when I'm doing it myself, I'm judging myself. Like, it's just not for me. However, I found that I could do an Instagram story really well to the phone. And I thought, this was before Instagram stories actually happened. It was Snapchat. And I started doing Snapchat stories, and I kind of had a knack for it. And I said, well, the first person who starts using a big camera and editing outside of the, Snapchat software is going to have a huge leverage in this platform. And then Instagram stories happened, and I was like, that person is me. So I started I was like, I don't know how to make a 10-minute YouTube video. I don't know what I'm going to talk about or fill it, but I can do 15 seconds of one Instagram slide, which is how long they were when they first started. And so I would film them, and it's really, really hard to make a 15-second. It's actually easier to make a 1-minute video. So I'd end up making 4 slides of just a moment, beginning, middle, and end. First slide was beginning, 2 slides were middle, was the end. And I just practiced. And those are probably garbage. If I look back now, like, you can still see those on my Instagram profile. I think I did 75 of those over the course of a year or so, of just filming them and just learning what I wanted for my edits, how I wanted to hold the camera, why a still shot was better here versus a moving shot, what kind of ways I hate moving the camera, the dreaded camera shake, when that's acceptable, and 90% of the time when it's not. I learned all those things inside this very tight compartment of just like my personal stories. And that allowed me to be ready to actually turn the camera sideways again and start filming the YouTube video or regular video. And so that's where I kind of learned how to deal with all of the complexity that video presents, was inside of those Instagram stories in a very low risk environment. I just said, I'm only going to do 15 seconds. If I make more, fine. But you can't, at the time, now there's shorts, which is great. So the barrier always gets lower and lower. But at the time, there was no Instagram shorts. You couldn't do a 15-second YouTube video. Nobody would watch it. It had to be 10 minutes long at that point. Otherwise, the algorithm wouldn't take it. So that's kind of how I got over the barrier, was just finding a better place for my beginner video to live than a place where it would just get drowned out.
And the transition to video editing as opposed to taking single shots, I mean, to me, that's a massive leap to go from taking still photos to not just taking video footage, but actually editing video footage. So how long did that take you to learn? How did you learn to edit video?
Well, again, I think there's two things that really helped me in learning my creative journey. One was I always surrounded myself with people who were way better. I mean, like professional top level, because I could take people on an adventure and I wasn't going to like steal their spotlight as a creator. I was always the guy people called if there was anything that needed to be done in Montana to help them produce a video or a film. I just ended up doing what I called being a four-wheel drive creator, where it's like, if you want to pay me to be talent, I'll be that. If you want to, ask me where my favorite, cliff to jump off of is in Northwest Montana, I'll take you there. So I just learned kind of by osmosis, by just being in the room. I created these relationships and I would beg people to show me how to edit. And so that's one of the first things. A friend of mine, RJ Bruni, who's he's a director and filmmaker out of Chilliwack, BC. He's done some really big stuff. And I just, had worked with him and my friend Alex on a couple of those Land Rover videos. And then when I started doing it, I was like, hey, man, I know you're in town. Can I beg a couple hours off of you to just show me how to edit, like the basics of jumping into a program? And he's like, yeah. And he came over and he showed me. So that was like a start. But I think that was, so I always had somebody who was like very professional. And then again, because my identity was not as a filmmaker, I wasn't trying to pose as something I wasn't yet. I was able to show my stuff once I'd made it to people and them go, oh, why did you cut it like that? Or maybe you do it like this a little bit better, or your audio sucked there, or, this clip is just too long. Like you need to cut on the action. I'm like, what does cut on the action mean? That's like a huge rule. As you start to get precious about your video clips, you take this video clip and it starts before somebody walks in the frame, the whole thing, they walk through the frame and then they leave the frame and then you cut it. Well, it should only start like when they're already in the frame and end while they're already in the frame. Cut on the action. That's way more visually appealing and easier for a viewer to watch. But those are the things you just don't know unless you're willing to ask, like, will you review my footage, and just lay yourself out there for people who are talented. Now, again, my dad used to say, you can judge a tree by its fruit. And what he meant was, at least this is what I think he meant, that basically if people aren't making good films, don't ask them for advice on how to make films, because you're just going to get garbage advice, right? So I tried to find people that I respected that would give me the time of day. And the way I would do that is I'd put value forward and take them on an adventure or be talent or do anything I could to help them out or just become their friend and then ask them, what was up. I didn't just go to some community college film school and learn the right way to do things. And then it wasn't the right way, right? Like usually just some random teacher that might be good or might be mediocre isn't going to have a very effective answer for the climate that video is requiring right now. So I always went to people who were really good, who I thought were really good anyway, and tried to learn from them.
What are your thoughts on the mechanisms for conventionally conveying story or narrative in a piece? For example, have you challenged yourself to make something without voiceover, without someone talking to camera? Because those are sort of go-tos, they're very common, they're conventional, but you could make a film without any spoken word dialogue and still convey a story. Is that something that you've played around with? Is that something you've challenged yourself with?
I have in commercial work, I definitely have. Definitely. I mean, a lot of the work that I've done recently has no sound at all. It just goes on websites or can be added to social media. It's just visuals. And we kind of move, from morning to night and throughout the day, or we move from location to location or from material to material, all these different types of ways. So definitely I have experimented with that. It's not very public facing for me. I know like on YouTube, I just know what the magic ingredient and what people want to see from me. They want to see me. That's it. Like I've been told, and I've come to believe that the strength I have is my transfer of enthusiasm and my curiosity. And so it really doesn't matter about the video quality. It matters that people are just there and they're getting excited about what I'm doing as if they were my friend. That's it. So there's kind of a bit of a formula there for me now to play with, at least for the next couple of years. But yeah, I've definitely experimented with, all sorts of ways of doing video. I think everything except for film and black and white. Film because it's too expensive, and black and white because I just haven't got there yet.
Earlier you suggested that you storyboard or at least scripts before you shoot. Is that the case with your YouTube videos or all your YouTube videos? Do you usually beforehand, before you start shooting, do you actually plan things out in quite a lot of detail?
So at minimum, and I know that this is kind of a very YouTubey thing to do, and some people are frowning upon this, but it really helps me kind of guide the story. Is at minimum, I pick out what a title is going to be. I'll write down 5 or 6 versions of a title, and then maybe the thumbnail font. And because I think that clickbait thumbnails are awesome, but they really suck if somebody clicks them and the story doesn't fulfill the promise of the thumbnail. When those things are too apart and you feel like you've been scammed. So I start with, okay, well, how do I phrase this? For instance, when I went to Hawaii or Kauai, I was going to be there. I was going to ride these trails. I knew I was going to ride those trails. I knew I was only going to ride them for one day. I was there for a fully different project. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to film it, but what is going to be, what do people want to see from me? What's the question that I have about these trails that I want to find out and document the answer to that question? That's really what I'm trying to find in a thumbnail. And so I thought one of the versions of the thumbnail that I wrote down was Hawaiian ice. Is it as slippery as they say it is? Now, that's very niche. Like even moto riders don't know what Hawaiian ice is. You have to be an American hard enduro rider to have even heard the phrase Hawaiian ice. So that like narrows it down to like 15,000 people. So that thumbnail didn't live, but the concept of that is, in the US, most US riders, if they've heard about it and if they've had the chance to ride it, consider these Hawaiian trails to be the hardest in the US, if not the world. And it's just because of the lack of traction, which the Hawaiians call Hawaiian ice. It's just insane. It's the most slippery surface besides ice. And so I thought, okay, well, what is interesting about this story? It's not that I'm just riding around in the jungle. That's not that interesting. But like, how hard is it? Are they the hardest trails on the earth? Are they the hardest trails in the world? I don't know. But let's find out. And so that was the thumbnail. And that was from which I shaped the question and the experience and the riding and the footage we shot. And the clips I kept were all unto is it the hardest trails on earth? That's kind of how I shaped it. So it changed my perspective. So that's like at minimum, I'll do that. There are other times where, and it goes better if you do this. I always get off script. I don't ever script things, but I will write down scenes, my intro scene, what I want to talk about, the question I want to ask of the viewer and of myself. Then I'll go into some things I want to point out that, I'll just imagine the entire video. And what that does actually, I'll write it all down, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do that, but what that does is it prepares my brain to observe things in a story type linear fashion, to not get distracted and go off on another tangent unless it's really so interesting that it pulls me away from my original concept. It helps me focus the story. So again, this is very simple. I'm not the type of guy who like journals every day or like plans my day or my week. I'm very light about that. I'm very spontaneous. But for instance, I'll just pull up a note here. Like I just shot, I've been hired by Zero Motorcycles to make some reels for their Instagram and YouTube shorts because they have very beautiful visuals, probably some of the best in the motorcycle industry. I mean, just absolutely stunning, like the level of like Audi or Mercedes. However, they don't have very much like people. Like they don't have me. They don't have like people like me that people actually want to like relate to. They just have very beautiful stuff. So they've hired me to kind of take the role of that. And so I went through and kind of, I did this ice race with the Zero motorcycle, and then that's going to come out. But just the other day I went up and shot, and I, kind of wrote down what the concept would be, which is I'm going to try and ride to the top of this mountain. There's snow at the top of this mountain. I have studs on this motorcycle. Things I want to talk about are the studs, the range, the torque, how it's quiet, the handling, how the seat feels, how the grips feel. Those are things. So talking points. But then in the intro, I wrote down like what I was going to say. I didn't say that exact thing, but I basically pointed out because like I wrote this the day before and I was like, 2 weeks ago, it was below freezing and 2 feet of snow here. Today it's 60 degrees. That's what I wrote down. It ended up being 70 degrees. There's no snow. So right then I present a kind of curious problem to the viewer. Like this idiot has put on studs on his motorcycle and there's no snow. Let's see what happens. Right? So I start by just writing something. I imagine myself there and what I would say to a friend. That's always too. I think a lot of time, I've heard actually Richard Hammond talk about this. in traditional TV hosting, you don't talk to hey guys or hey subscribers. You talk to one person, one viewer. And that viewer for me is always my friend Forrest Mankins. I just always picture him. I don't know why. It's just him, and it's how I talk to him. It's how I would be excited to chat with him.
Does he know about this relationship you have with him?
He does. He does. I don't picture him naked or anything. I wouldn't be that weird. But no. So I just talk to him because I know how I talk to him in real life. I'm very enthusiastic because he's my friend and I like being around him. And I'm always excited about something that I've been waiting to tell him from the last time I saw him. And that's kind of the posture I take. So then I go through and I write this whole thing. And I even have like the ending of, I've made it to the lookout. I have no idea if I'm going to make it to the lookout. But as I'm like writing and I get to a spot where I'm like, I should probably say something here, I can flick through and be like, oh, I'm kind of in the middle of this story. It's different. There's different things to talk about. Different things happened. But here's what's going on. So that's about as detailed as I get. I don't actually like shot list unless I'm forced to by a commercial client. I don't.
Right.
Can get pretty boring. And I'm not the type of person who needs every detail thought out. I usually, I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet. But that I find creates another reason that I write out these notes here is it removes a barrier to getting out there and shooting and being like, I don't know what I'm going to say when I get out there. I know what I'm going to say. At bare minimum, I'm going to say this, and this is going to make an okay film. But I know once I get out there, things will happen and it will make a better film than this. So it kind of supports me. I also write down like the shots I want. Like I imagine the shots. Like I want this drone shot of this, or I want to get riding shot with the camera on a tripod and go by. And it helps me work through the logistics of like, well, I solo film this whole video I'm talking about right now. So obviously I can't have somebody like pan as I go by. That's not going to happen. So it helps me write down like what kind of gear I need to bring. And it's just a little bit of a plan. That's kind of how I do it when I really get into it. Obviously this is a client video, but they've hired me to do kind of like a YouTube type of version of my work. So it's still pretty chill, but that really helps. So I'll just spend a little bit of time writing that. And as soon as it gets irritating or I'm bored or I'm like, I don't know what else to write, I'm done. And I'm just moving on. I'm going to go make the thing. I'm trying to create as little resistance as possible to getting out there and making this thing happen.
Do you ever place constraints or limitations on yourself as a mechanism to force creativity?
I wouldn't say I intentionally do that for creativity. I kind of come at it the other way around, which is I want to ride a motorcycle to the top of this mountain. I want studs on it. So we're just talking about the same thing here. Well, I did this video 4 years ago. I had a motorcycle that I bought for $100. I didn't have any studs, so I went to the hardware store and bought some screws. So I kind of flipped that on its head in that I don't let not having the thing to make the video work right stop me from making it anyway. I will make it out of absolutely nothing. I find that more interesting. To these creative restraints, they exist in real life. I don't need to impose them on myself. I just think bigger. I'm a maximalist when it comes to making video. I'm like, what if I could take this motorcycle, tow my friend? We don't have a snowmobile. How far up the mountain will we make it? And what if I put studs on there? Well, I don't have studs. Well, what if I just put little screws from the hardware store in there? How long are those going to last? Well, let's find out. Let's go build this thing. And I think I paid $100 for the motorcycle and like $10 or $15 for the screws. And so to answer your questions, I don't put the restraints on myself. I just think bigger than my resources allow, and voila, you have creative constraints. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Listener, go watch that video. By the way, it's on Isaac's YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun, like all of Isaac's films. During your recent appearance on the Trail and Adventure Motorbike podcast, you expressed a desire to make more motorbike-based content. What's so appealing for you to center motorcycles in your filmmaking?
I always want to ride a motorcycle. There's like never a day where I don't want to ride a motorcycle. So if I can, again, it's all about removing barriers. Like there are some days if I was I've made running films. Not last summer, the summer before, I got hired by Solomon and went to Chamonix and ran 10 to 20 miles a day for 4 or 5 days, filming these ultra athletes while I held a camera and kept up with them and didn't stop them. They'd run by me and I have to catch back up. I like running, but I don't love running. Okay? Like there are a lot of days where I'm not running because I don't like it that much. So if I can make moto stuff, and like I've said before, my superpower is transfer of enthusiasm and curiosity. I have to authentically be enthusiastic about the thing I want to make a film about. I have to authentically be curious about finding out, is the new Sur-Ron Hyper-V pit bike better than the pit bikes I already have? And what can I do with it? And how far will it go? Those are questions I want to answer anyway. So making a film about that removes a little bit of a barrier. So that's why moto content is top for me. I also think that when I look at the moto landscape, talking about timing and luck, there's just not a lot of people like me making moto content. There are a lot of people trying to be Itchy Boots, but there already is an Itchy Boots, right? She's doing great. There doesn't need to be another one, or maybe a couple, but not 10, not 20. So maybe that's what I see as a little bit of an opportunity there, that maybe I'll make a little bit different stuff than what exists in the landscape. But that's about as far as the strategy goes. Mostly it's just, I like riding motorcycles. I've known from in the past that if I follow my passion into what I like and I create content around it, that eventually brands are like, hey, you should have one of our motorcycles. And when that day comes, I'll be so excited, because I've gotten a lot of really, I can get running shoes tomorrow for free. But, I like running, but it's training for motorcycles.
Whereabouts do you see your filmmaking, or specifically your motorbike filmmaking ambitions lying? And I'm thinking big sort of picture here. Are there other forms of filmmaking that you'd like to try, like longer pieces? And I think from looking at your YouTube channel, I haven't seen anything that's longer than about 21, 22 minutes, something like that. So is that something that excites you, the idea of making something a bit more epic, and at least in terms of length, or just maybe even other forms, like maybe something fictional, for example?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there.
I would love to do more like that. I have ambitions to make documentaries about motorcycles and stuff like that, but those typically require me to have resources, money, because they're going to take a lot of time, and they're going to take my eye off the prize when it comes to what pays the bills, which is commercial filmmaking. So I'm definitely interested and looking for and pushing for those opportunities. The motorsports industry is a very funny one to work in, because everybody wants to be part of it, so everybody will take less than they're worth. So there's not a lot of money in it, even though it does make money as an industry, unless you're KTM and you spend all the money. But barring them, it does make money as an industry. Same thing happens in venture outdoor. Try to get a $10,000 project from a company that makes Gore-Tex jackets. Good luck. It's going to be very, very difficult, because everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to work for Arc'teryx, in that industry. They all do. They all want to go hike around the mountains and tell stories about Gore-Tex jackets. It's just what happens. So I have to work harder and get paid less in that industry, which means that it's more fun for me to make more relatable, less production value films. Now, the big secret in making anything or documenting anything you do, I've always said this, and it just is so true, is that the more you're documenting the experience that you're doing, the less good the experience is and the less authentic it really is. So if you're making a grand tour, for instance, it is not anything like what Grand Tour makes it look like. All it is a film shoot. That's all it is. It is not an adventure. Now, they make it seem like an adventure, and if you've never seen the sausage be made, you think it's an adventure. It's wonderful. But as far as on the other side, as Jeremy and Richard, their experience, it's not actually going to be an adventure for them. It's a film shoot. It's a job. And that is the way that equation works, is the more you document it, the less authentic that experience really is, the less that really is an adventure. So I love to have the bare minimum of documenting and the maximum authenticity. And it doesn't matter, it still takes away from it, but that's kind of how I've ended up aiming until I start to get finances, and then we can really spend some time crafting a story. And typically I want to craft that story about somebody else, not myself, because I'm maybe a little bit precious about my adventure experiences. I want them to be authentic, which is why you don't see me running around with a big expensive camera. I have several big expensive cameras. I don't bring them on those kinds of shoots. Like I said, like we were talking about in Kauai, I just shot that whole thing on GoPro and phone. I had a big camera with me in Kauai. I didn't bring it out there. I wasn't going to ask my friends to stop riding on this. They're all paying like $500 for the day to ride. I'm going to be like, no, hold up. Wait till you climb that hill. I wanted them to enjoy their experience to the fullest and for the camera to be as minimum distraction as possible. So that said, yes, I do want to make these films. And where my ambition lies, if I was to dream huge, I would actually, because I am media agnostic, I would love to be the director of marketing for a major motorcycle brand, whether that be a retailer or an actual motorcycle brand. And I would love to kind of stretch my legs and make a content marketing strategy that doesn't rely on racing. Because it's like something like 75 or 80% of riders have never raced or don't want to race a motorcycle. I would love to have it not be all about badassery that exists in motorcycles, but all about the community, camaraderie, the feeling of being on a motorcycle, the fun, the excitement, the joy, the kind of the flubs and the laughing at your friend when he goes down gently, that kind of vibe about motorcycling, that's motorcycling to me. And I would love to prove that concept with a brand that we could take from kind of zero to hero. That would be, and this is getting very vulnerable for me because I don't say this very much out loud, but that would be the thing that I absolutely believe would be the ultimate test of whether or not stories and engaging video, photos, writing, whether or not that actually can move the needle and get people to join a brand or a movement. That would really be the ultimate test, is to say, all right, well, we can make lower level Isaac stuff. We can make big, beautiful films. We can make entire marketing strategies, and it doesn't have to revolve around a winning race team. Even though we might have that. I'm not saying we can't have that. I just think that the moto industry for a long time has really been, adventure bikes is a little bit different, but like specifically with enduro and kind of like race bike thing, they've all been kind of pivoted towards, is the guy riding that color of bike winning? Doesn't matter if it's a good looking bike, it just has to win. And missing out on what 75 to 80% of riders actually do, which is just go for trail rides with their buddies and laugh and have a beer at the end. Like that's what motorcycling is. It is not pushing your limits. It can be, but it's not for most people.
Yeah, I was talking recently with Greg Villalobos, who works for Adventure Spec.
Yeah,
and he was kind of saying the same thing or a similar thing about the way that some of the brands market their bikes based on this really spectacular riding, which you can maybe do in North America. You can't do that in Europe because you just don't have the countryside or whatever that allows that. Or if you think about the British green lanes or the English, I think the English green lanes, I have to be careful with my terminology here. I mean, you can't ride that way because there are horses, there are hikers, there are runners on those tracks as well. So you've got to be mindful of other users.
Yeah.
And so there is a disconnect between the marketing images and how people are actually going to be using those bikes and seeing themselves riding them. So, but it also comes back to what you're saying about authenticity, and usually authenticity in marketing is a lot more successful, isn't it?
I would like to think so. I think there's a space for it. If everybody was being authentic, then somebody would be able to stand out with some sort of polished, not true to nature, racy type of thing. But I feel like specifically in motorcycling, or at least in the brands, maybe not BMW. I have done some stuff for BMW, and they do a little bit different. In the adventure bike area is a little bit different. But I'm talking specifically in like enduro, motocross, that kind of thing. That's actually how I got connected with Sherco years ago. Sherco USA was, I said, hey, look, you guys look like you're just starting up here in the US. I'd love to do something with you. Send me some bikes. I'll make a story. I'll make a story about this bike, and it'll be totally stupid. It won't be like I was like motorcycler versus hiker. It was a totally made up story. And not one of my best, I would even say, but they loved it. They were like, nobody had ever even pitched that idea to them. Everybody was just like, hey, I'm going to make this badass story. Give me one of your pro riders and we're going to go hit these jumps. And yeah, okay. We've all seen that. Like, again, that's inspiring, but it is, a small piece of the story pie that motorcycles are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start winding things up here a little bit. Just a couple of final questions, Isaac. Can you identify key filmmaking influences on you? Which films, filmmakers, or maybe YouTube channels that you would encourage others to watch or that have been sort of significant in your journey as a filmmaker yourself?
I mean, nothing really in moto. Though, I mean, Llewellyn Pavey, I really love his films, especially his adventure films. When he goes out and does stuff, that's really inspiring moto-wise. But for me, I started watching YouTube. I think I said like 10 or whatever it was when it started, and I was a huge Casey Neistat fan before he even started vlogging. And now, obviously, that style's been burned to death. Even Casey stopped doing it. But the core tenets of what he did, which was just take a daily story that wasn't that interesting and make it into a beginning, middle, and end, and make it into an engaging story, and really letting his personality drive it, his kind of obsession and curiosity, that is very formative for me, even though I wouldn't say I'm nearly as good as him, nor would I ever be as good as him, nor do I even aim to be like him. I'm not trying to be Casey Neistat. Another filmmaker that I really love and enjoy a ton of what he does is Bo Miles. And again, both these guys don't do moto. That's not the thing, but they, the way they make films is really great. So I've really been enjoying, learning about filmmaking of that style. And there are a bunch of other people that do that, but I would say those two really stand out for me. I've enjoyed the, the RevZilla team, Ari and Zach, of course. They're really good. Like, they're telling stories like the one where they rode across Wyoming, never touching pavement. And they're like stupidly like carrying their vintage motorcycles across pavement so they don't touch it. What a dumb concept that made, I think, their best video. Or the Dumb and Dumber recreation one. They recently came out with one that was a bit more dramatic, but it was really close to Ari about his dad and his dad's motorcycle. Those guys are doing awesome inside of motorsports. Like, they're really, and gosh, good for them to be connected with RevZilla and have kind of those resources to be able to tell that and not wasting it on like just BS films, but actually like really pushing the limit of what they can make. So I'd say those three are probably some of the, where I want to be. Because again, those three are all very personality based. We know the names of the characters versus the channel name. I don't know the channel name, right? I don't know. So, but I know RevZilla. So obviously, RevZilla's bet is working for for that project. That whatever Ari and Zach are making for them is putting the RevZilla name out there further, which I think more companies should do that. I would love to see more companies sponsor creators long term and let them make what they want, almost like a patron type system from the Renaissance age. Just works.
Okay, final famous last question. From your own personal experience, does filmmaking enhance or diminish the pleasure of a motorcycle ride?
Oh, it diminishes it. Insanely diminishes it. No, fuck filmmaking all the time. I can't tell you, I did 75 hours on my enduro bike last year. I probably filmed 5 to 10 hours of it. It's a distraction. It totally degrades the experience. My best rides, my funniest moments, everything is not on film. And that's because I need my well to be filled before I can be in front of camera and be an authentic person. I can't come irritated and bummed that I have to film a video and film anything that's engaging or will be worth watching. I just can't. But that means that I have to ride a lot of motorcycles before I'm ready to film riding motorcycles. Yeah, I'm going out for a ride tonight, not filming, not doing it. I'm going to go ride for me.
Thanks so much for being my guest for this episode, Isaac. Where can listeners find your work online?
Well, if they found me interesting enough to continue looking, I'm grateful. They can look at my YouTube channel at Isaac Johnston. Just search for Isaac. I'm sure you'll figure out how to spell it. It's not spelled like it sounds, so good luck with that. Isaac Johnston. Same thing on Instagram, Isaac S. Johnston, or my website is isaacjohnston.co. You can find all of my stuff on there. Simon mentioned off notes probably that I do have a workshop on Creative Live. That's just on how to be a freelancer. You can check that out if you want. But really, if you want to watch more or hear more about what I'm doing, I think YouTube's the best spot, Isaac Johnston. Plus, I don't have any subscribers on there. I'm trying to beat the professional writer Cody Webb in subscribers. I think I have, I don't even know, 6,000 something. He's got like 25,000 something.
6.58K as we record this.
Yeah, it's going up. So yeah, if you want to subscribe to me there, you could help me beat this guy. And if I beat him in subscribers, he'll give me like a one-on-one class so I can become a better rider. And hopefully the riding will be more engaging because even as much as I do moto, I'm not that good of a rider. I'm just a middle of the road at best. On my good days when I'm not tired, which is like 5 minutes into the ride.
Okay, great. Look, thanks again. Naturally, I look forward to seeing more of those motorbike films. Take care and ride safe.
Yeah, thank you.